Nik Airball is known for playing big pots with nothing. He's not afraid to bluff, he's not afraid to gamble, but every once in a while, a blind squirrel finds a nut.
Huh?
Wow. That would be quads for Nik Airball. How much will Airball look for here?
Sometimes discretion is the better part of valor.
What? Dude, check the camera. I didn't smile. I didn't smile. I know.
Lose with quads and you know you're unlucky. Sometimes discretion is the better part of valor.
Whatever. Whatever, man.
We were playing 100, 200, 400 on No Gamble, No Future. It folds around to Eric Person on the button with $310,000 and the 7 high. A good 7 high, though. 7-5 of diamonds. He opts to just limp. You may say, why not raise? Shouldn't you raise everything you want to play from the button? And quite often you do. However, we are playing No Gamble, No Future on PokerGO. This is a game that features loose, aggressive, splashy, battly action. And if you raise the 7-5 of diamonds on the button and then get re-raised, which is going to happen more often in this game than it will in a normal game, you're going to have to call, be in position, but in a big pot. And that's not really what you want. Instead, if you limp and then someone raises to, let's say, 2,500 or something like that, you can easily call in position, closing the action, and get to see the flop with a much deeper stack to pot ratio, which suited connectors really enjoy. So I actually don't mind this limp from Eric. Next, Ellie Lesser in the small blind, $33,000 deep with 10-7 of clubs, opts to just call as well. You may say, why not raise to punish the limper? Because you don't know what the limper's limping with, and you will have 10 high out of position with 2 additional players with random hands yet to act. That's not a great spot. Ellie Lesser needs to call with the 10-7 of clubs. Nik Airball in the big blind with 8-4 offsuit. Not a good hand. Nik Airball doesn't care. He opts to call. And this again is defensible. You may say, why would you call with the 8-4 offsuit? 8-4 offsuit is terrible. Well, because at this point you have to put in $200 to try to win a total of $1,600. Essentially, he needs to realize 1/8 of this pot on average. And look, 8-4 offsuit's bad, but it probably just will. And then finally, Pink in the straddle opts to check with a Queen 10 offsuit. Again, why not punish the limpers? Because Eric Person is not going to fold in position very often at all. The other limpers could easily have reasonable hands against your Queen 10, so simply check and see the flop. Sometimes limping is good. Let's go to the flop.
We don't really limp a lot in Chicago. I don't really know how to respond. Yeah, me neither.
Trip 8s for Airball.
The flop comes Queen of Spades, 8 of Spades, 8 of Diamonds. Trips for Nik Airball, top pair for Pink. Backdoor junkie draw for Eric Person, nothing for Alezra. Alezra is first, he checks. Nik Airball opts to check. And if this was a raised pot, you typically do want to check to the initial raiser because the initial raiser very often has a bit of a range advantage, a bit of a nut advantage in a lot of scenarios. And for that reason, they're going to bet sometimes and you can then put in a check raise. In limp pots, though, you definitely want to consider betting because if you check, no one really has much of range or nut advantage because everybody has marginal stuff. So for that reason, you're not going to be able to get in the check raise nearly as often. That said, the check with the 8-4 is perfectly fine. Pink is in a similar scenario. He certainly could bet in this spot, but I think checking is good as well. Eric Person on the button. I don't think I would mind taking a stab at this one if you think you're going to get your opponents to fold very frequently. And if you do expect them to lead, or at least bet, with a lot of their best hands on the flop, perhaps with a hand like 8-4, when they check, that's going to make their range even weaker, which makes a bet with the backdoor junkie draw even better. That said, these players don't like to fold, so Eric very wisely checks it back.
Queen for Pink.
Bingo!
Oh, wow. That would be quads for Nik Airball. And Pink's not lying when he says, I got it.
Or non-picture card in Eric's hand. For
The turn is the 8 of clubs. Awesome for Nik Airball. A disaster for Pink. Nik Airball is winning this hand unless he is against it. Straight flush and it comes in. Alezra nothing checks. Nik Airball checks. You may say, why check? You have 4 of a kind. You have to get money in the pot. The thing is, though, is that unless you're against a full house, you're going to have a tough time getting money in the pot. But if you are against a full house, especially a queen, perhaps checking and looking to put in a check raise becomes very, very viable. Also, if you are against nothing and you bet, no one's going to call, right? But if you let it go, check, 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 check again, and go to the river, maybe your opponent's improved to a full house that will then pay you off. So I like this check, especially with 2 players yet to act. Pink, with his full house, goes for a medium-sized bet. I think that is perfectly reasonable. At this point, he thinks he has the best hand the majority of the time, and he wants to get value from weaker full houses, maybe ace high. And he also doesn't really mind getting protection if he is against random hands containing an ace or a king. So he goes for the bet. That makes a whole lot of sense. Let's see how Nik Airball responds.
I don't think so.
That's what I thought I saw.
That would be shocking because it would mean I have 3 cards. I'm going to narrow down the colors in my hand.
Airball makes it 10K, pink call.
Nik Airball check raises huge to $10,000. You may say, why make it so big? Your opponent's going to fold everything. Well, no, they're not. If they have a queen, they're not going to fold. And if they have even a hand like pocket 4s, maybe they'll decide to get overly sticky, thinking that Nik Airball is just trying to run a big bluff because Nik Airball loves running bluffs with airballs. So I like this play. Also, when you are playing very deep stacked, notice these players are playing something like $108,000 deep effective, you want to use bigger bets in general in situations where your raising range should be incredibly polarized. In this situation, Nik Airball should have quads or nothing. And if he has quads or nothing, he's very, very polarized because he has either 100% equity or far less than that, close to 0. When that is the case, you often want to use very, very large bet sizes. And that's even more so the case when your opponent's going to have some second nut hands that simply cannot really fold like a queen. So Nik Airball does go huge. You may say, should pink ever just let this go, facing this bet? And that's tough to say. Normally, the answer would be just no. But a lot of people do not bluff in situations like this. They're going to have an 8 or they're going to have nothing, but they're almost never going to have nothing because they realize pink is going to have a whole lot of hands containing a queen or an 8. So a lot of people don't bluff this spot. And if they're not going to bluff this spot and they're not going to check raise with a random queen, pink's hand is a bluff catcher. And if people don't bluff this spot often enough, folding immediately may actually be the best play. But unfortunately for him, he's against Nik Airball, and against Nik Airball, I would never fold.
How much will Airball look for here?
Maybe this can save him. They're just playing for a chop at this point if you're in pink's mind.
Lining up a pretty big overbet, it looks like. There it goes.
The river is the king of clubs. A disaster for pink because he now loses to perhaps some sporadic bluffs. If Nik Airball happened to have a hand like King Jack, King 10, King 9, something like that. Again, it's kind of hard to figure out exactly which hands Nik Airball would even want to bluff with on the turn. But Nik Airball correctly realizes he's against a full house or maybe a busted draw. If he's against a busted draw, pink is going to fold to any bet. If he's against a full house, pink's going to call a big bet a large chunk of the time. Now, the problem for Nik Airball is that if he was against a queen, which is a very likely hand for pink, and exactly what he does have, the king may scare him out of the pot. So you don't want to go too incredibly big unless you think he's going to call literally any bet that is not close to all in. Nik Airball perhaps knows his opponent. He goes huge, 2x pot, which again is what you should do when your range is very, very polarized to either quads or nothing. I like this play. I think it's a good play. This is perhaps not a play you want to make against your, hello, talking to all of you, against your weaker, tighter, straightforward opponents because they're going to get scared in the spot. They're going to think, oh man, he could have been bluffing with a king, or oh man, he definitely has an 8 now, and they will let go of a queen. But this is no gamble, no future. These players came to play. I love Nik Airball's bet. I think it's pretty good. What I want to know, though, before we move forward, is what do you think pink should do? Again, you don't know Nik Airball has quads. What would you do against Nik Airball? Would you find the call or would you let it go? Let me know in the comment section down below. While you're down there, hit the notification bell, click the like button, click subscribe. Let's see if pink can find the fold.
You got it. How do I lose all these hands? Oh, nice hand.
A little bit of a slow roll at the end, too.
How much? 40?
Prior to dragging a pot worth more than $100,000.
That's a slow roll. I knew you were slow rolling.
I have 5-7 of diamonds, Airball.
Dude, check the camera. I didn't smile. I
Well,
didn't smile. I know.
lose with quads and you know you're unlucky.
Well, usually when I make a full house, I lose, so I'm used to it.
After a bit of deliberation, pink decides to call. Nik Airball says something along the lines of, you got it. Pink tables his hand. He thinks he made a good call, and then Nik Airball shows quads. Now, when someone slow rolls you, what should you do? I'll tell you what some people do. They get mad and frustrated and then play badly because they feel like they deserve that pot or their opponent wronged them, and they get angry. But that's silly, Because if you think about it, it doesn't really matter how long it takes your opponent to turn over their cards. And in reality, it also doesn't really matter what they say to you. So, in my mind, you have two options in this situation, depending on your image. First option is act like you're mad, tilted, and annoyed, but then just play good poker and crush them because their calling ranges against you are going to be far too wide in the future because they think you're going to be mad and annoyed and trying to get even. Your other option is to look at your opponent as if they are a joke, because that kind of stuff doesn't bother you because you are not a child. You recognize it does not matter if your opponent says something silly to you or mean to you or aggressive to you, or if they take slightly longer to turn over their hand, they had the winning hand, they get the pot, let's move on with our lives. This often has the effect of letting the slow roller, it makes them feel as if they are dumb. Now, no, I'm not saying that's the case in this scenario. But if your opponent does something to you, thinking it's going to rattle you, and then you just don't care at all, it lets them know that you have a much stronger mindset than the average player, and probably the slow roller, because slow rollers very often don't especially like to get slow rolled themselves. They know it bothers them, so they want to try to bother other people. So I personally just sit there and look at them like they're a joke. That's what I do. But you do whatever works best for your image. Next question becomes, should you slow roll your opponents if in theory there's not anything against the rules about it? And I would say no, because while it may gain you some edge in this particular scenario in the short term, it will make you an antagonist in people's minds. And if you are an antagonist, somebody who is mean, who people naturally have negative feelings towards, that will close so many doors for you in the future. If people view you as a jerk, a mean person, a bully, they're not going to want to work with you. They're not going to want to interact with you. They're not going to want to do fun things with you, and they're not going to want to build value in the world with you. So my recommendation is to not slow roll people. Good luck in your games. Have fun. If you make a full house, I hope you don't lose all your money. And if you make quads, I hope you find a way to get paid. I'll talk to you next time.